Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's time for the Brown Sports Bag. From the heart of the Barrens, a weekly local sports machine. Alongside John Butler, here's your host, James Brown.
Well, we're back again this week, John, and we're going to do a few things here. We're going to start off here talking about the fact that they released the NFL schedule for the 2020 season. Season kicks off on September 10th. Then we're going to talk a little bit in the second segment about a message basically from Julian Tackett on Friday, I believe it was. He did an open interview for a bunch of media outlets and talked about the possibility of the fall sports and just different things related to that. Then we're going to talk a little Korean baseball in the third segment, and we're going to push that also into talking about the MLB possible return on the weekend of July 4th. I think there's some movement in place. But let's start off with this NFL schedule, John. The first game back when the season starts on September 10th will be a Thursday night. It's the Chiefs and the Texans. Why'd they want to do that to the Texans like that, John?
Well, that's true. The last time the Chiefs and Texans played was in the playoffs, and I think the Texans had a 24-0 lead and then proceeded to give up 50 straight points and lost.
Yeah, I really believe that the NFL does not like O'Brien, the head coach of the Texans, because, I mean, they're taking his worst nightmare. But maybe this is a redemption opportunity for him where they can bring him back, and, you know, he has a chance to prove that he isn't the idiot that a lot of people tried to make him out to be after that game was over with. But we'll see.
Well, I'm not really for sure why they picked the Texans, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, The only thing exciting about the Texans is their quarterback, and other than that, there's not a lot of excitement with how they play, to be perfectly honest with you. He's a great player, but they lost their best receiver in Hopkins, and it's obvious why they put Kansas City. You know, they're Super Bowl champions, and they play a nice brand. You know, they're fun to watch, but a little surprised they picked the Texans.
Yeah, I really thought whenever they were talking about doing the schedule, and the thing is like the methodology for the schedule is set ahead of time, meaning, you know, if you're the fourth place team in your division and you play, you know, a weaker schedule, if you went to the Super Bowl, you play a stronger schedule, etc. So it's kind of, I mean, so these two teams would play a stronger schedule, but I don't think people were just begging for this to be the game to kick off the season.
In normal times, that's probably true, but I have a funny feeling you could put anybody on TV, and if we get to play September, whatever, I think people will be overjoyed.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, the XFL was doing pretty good in its ratings before the COVID ended its season. So, you know, that's a good point you make right there. Some other games that I thought were interesting in that first week, the Dolphins at the Patriots. Now, I actually think that's a pretty interesting game because I really believe the Dolphins did good work in the offseason. And, you know, of course, the Patriots are going to be without Tom Brady. We're going to get, I guess, to see if Jared Stidham is the real deal. I believe Jared Stidham originally was from Corbin before his family moved to Texas. I believe that's correct. We're going to get.
I did not know that. But, yeah, I mean, the Patriots are going to be a very interesting – they should be an interesting watch just in the sense of what they'll be like without Brady. Now, the problem that they're going to have is they weren't very good last year offensively, and they had Brady. So it's going to be a lot of pressure on the new quarterback, but they've not really done anything to increase the weapons around him, per se. And the question with Miami is, will Tua play this year, or will he play even early? You know, he just signed, I saw the date where he just signed for $30 million as a rookie contract. So he's, he's had a pretty good day today.
Yeah, I mean, that I also believe that might signal that he plays right away, especially if you kind of look at the possibility of how the preseason gets structured, you know, whether or not they limit the number of preseason games they play, or, you know, and focus more on just trying to get people in and get them conditioned and ready for the season. You know, it'll be interesting to see whether they say, you know, hey, what was it, Fitzpatrick, I think? No.
Fitzpatrick is their starting quarterback.
Yeah,
the problem that any rookie is going to have this year, especially at the quarterback position, is they're not going to have they've already missed out on some of the spring workouts and things like that, and it's clearly going to be a reduced amount of time that they can even get get with their teammates, which is going to make it difficult especially for the rookies, to play instantly. That's probably going to. I have a funny feeling that's probably going to keep Tua more out of the lineup than his injury.
Well, and to your point on that too is it will be close to a year since the last time he actually played in a live game. I mean, it'll be a couple of months away from that, but it's going to be closer to a year than it is not since the last time he was in a live game. So to your point, I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick, as he has proven, can just basically step in there and just play from the get-go. And you're right. I mean, there's going to be a clamoring for him to get on the field, probably both from the ownership because they just paid the man and from the fans because they want to see what they have, but it's probably smart that he doesn't start right out on the field.
Yeah, I don't think he will. They're in no rush. I mean, they've got him signed for 4 years and coming off that, major hip surgery and probably going to be lack of practice time. I would think that his time on the field will probably be delayed a little bit.
We look at the magnificence of Patrick Mahomes, but Patrick Mahomes did get basically a year to learn and get to be a better quarterback before they stuck him out there. So I think that's beneficial. He
only played one game his first year. He sat behind Alex Smith.
Yeah, I actually think that's very beneficial. I think it's rough on a young quarterback to stick them out there, no matter how well they actually play. I just think that's a bad spot to be in because there's so much. Yes, they play football, and they've played football, and he played at Alabama, but there's so much to learn probably in the NFL to just drink in, not just how to be a football player, but just being in the NFL itself.
True, but Kansas City had the luxury of having an established quarterback that was a good player, and Patrick Mahomes was not the number one pick in the draft or even the top 10 pick. I think he fell to 12 or 13, so
yeah.
I don't think there was that clamor and that pressure of playing Mahomes at Kansas City. Plus, he was a really good college quarterback, but he played at, I think, Texas Tech, and
right.
That's not Alabama, it's not LSU, and he was not a national champion or even a Heisman Trophy winner. So I think the stress of playing those type of quarterbacks is not as much as say the Bengals having to play Burrow.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll get to the Bengals here in a little bit, but the next game on the list that actually interests me is the Packers at the Vikings because I want to see how salty Aaron Rodgers is and whether or not he tells the Packers to jump in the lake or he shows up for that first game ready to light the world on fire.
Or both.
Or both.
Yeah. I think he's going to be salty, but I also think he will play well. Assuming that his weapons, he's got a really good receiver in Devontae Adams, but to say that their offense was exciting to watch last year, I think is an understatement.
Well, and the biggest thing for the Packers the last few years has basically been they've not had an offensive line to protect Rodgers. I mean, he's playing pretty well and getting beat up at the same time the last 3 or 4 years. And
he's a tremendous talent.
Yeah, and they didn't do anything to fix that.
It just looks like to me that Green Bay may have had a window to take advantage of that talent in terms of not just Super Bowls. They won one with him, but more appearances in the Super Bowl, and they just haven't really done that.
Yeah, it's sort of like the Dolphins with Marino whenever he was there. They had a great talent, but they just couldn't seem to build a team around that talent that could take full advantage of it.
Right, except for Miami did have offensive talent and never had the defense really to go with it, and it seems like Green Bay has kind of been caught in the middle. They've not had tremendous weapons on the outside. I mean, some, but their defense has been kind of behind. And then last year, they've drafted defensive players, it seems like, for the last 10 years. And they've just kind of been stuck in this, I don't know, where they're good but not good enough.
Yeah. Well, in that game, it's going to be at Minnesota, and the Vikings, they are a team. They look like they're a threat maybe to win a Super Bowl or get to a Super Bowl, but they can't quite seem to ever figure it out in the last 20 years, really.
Yeah, they've been, I think Kirk Cousins has helped them, but, there's still people have doubts about him as well. And I don't think the NFC champion is going to come out of that division. I'll just say that.
No, I'm with you. And then that takes me to our next game that I think is pretty interesting on the first week, and that's the Browns at the Ravens because, what we get to see in both of these teams, whether this last year was a fluke or the real deal, because I think the Ravens performed a lot better than everybody expected them to, and Lamar Jackson was a huge part of that. But then on the Browns side, they didn't perform anywhere near as well as everybody expected them to, and it's basically, was that also a fluke? I mean, so I think that's a pretty interesting opening game.
Yeah, well, I don't think the Ravens are a fluke. I think they are for real. They've got a system and a style that is very difficult to stop, and I'm sold on Lamar Jackson as long as he stays healthy, and very sold on him. Cleveland had too much, anytime you get too much hype, it seems like in the NFL, it doesn't work out.
Yeah, they were reading their press clippings.
They had way too much hype, too much talking. They were not very well coached last year, and this year's been much quieter for them, so therefore, my theory goes, the quieter that you are, then generally your chances of success at that level goes up.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. The next game that I marked down here that I thought was pretty interesting was the Chargers at the Bengals. That goes with what you were saying about Joe Burrow. And in the case of both of these teams, they both have long-time quarterbacks that are now gone. And in the case of the Bengals, they brought in the number one pick, and we're going to, he's an Ohio boy, and so there's a lot, I think, going back to the hype thing, there's a lot of hype surrounding how he will perform for the Bengals. Meanwhile, the Chargers, I think everybody's kind of like just writing them off for this next season, and we're going to see how that pans out.
I think the Chargers are going to be good.
Yeah.
They should have a tremendous defense. Losing Phillip Rivers hurts, but he didn't play very well last year either, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I think the Chargers could be sneaky good with Taylor as the quarterback. He's not my favorite, but he's mobile, a lot more mobile than Rodgers, than Rivers, and I like the Chargers, to be honest with you. And the Bengals going to have a long year. I mean, anytime you start a rookie quarterback, who I think is going to be really good, it's going to be a long year for them.
Mm-hmm.
In a very tough division, and I don't think that won't be an easy start for them as well.
There's a game here. I believe it's a Sunday night game. The Bucs at the Saints. That's the next one I had that I thought was a pretty interesting opening game for pretty obvious reasons. I mean, you got Tom Brady with the Buccaneers now, and this could be the last year. You're talking about windows closing with the Packers. This may be the windows closing year for the Saints in terms of with Drew Brees, whether they can get over the hump this year. And that's that's a divisional game, and so that it has a lot of meaning on the first week.
Yeah, that's my favorite game of the first week. That's you're talking about a ratings bonanza.
Uh-huh.
Watching Brady with his new team, the Bucs, and then Drew Brees and the Saints, and that should be a fun one. I mean, two Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and that will be interesting to watch. That's probably my favorite game of the first week.
Yeah, I would say that probably. I would have rather have seen that as the opening game. I know it probably was not the right one to put there, but if there was a game that would have a whole lot of hype surrounding it coming into the season to kind of get things juiced, I really believe it would be that game instead of the Chiefs and the Texans.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Now, the final game I have on my list here is the last game of the week, and that's the Titans at the Broncos. That's going to be at 9:10 p.m. on Monday night. We will also carry that game on 105.3 The Point. With Mike Keith on the call. So if you like to do the radio thing, and I hope people do, then you can listen to that. I think that's an interesting game because, the Titans were a surprising team, but how they did it should not surprise anybody, and I think they can duplicate that. Meanwhile, the Broncos are another one of those teams in the last couple of years or 3 years don't seem to be able to put forth a consistent formula where you can look at the Broncos and say this is what they do. It seems like they don't have a plan all the time.
They have been given rave reviews with the draft, though. The Broncos, Drew Lock, former quarterback from Missouri, has started the last 4 games for the Broncos, maybe 5, and went 3-2.
Mm-hmm.
Threw the ball really well, and their first 2 draft picks were receivers. the kid out of Alabama, and then the second round pick was another receiver, and it looks like that John Elway and the guys have decided they're going to compete in that division with Kansas City. They're going to have to score.
Well,
and,
they're not wrong.
Yeah, it's never easy to play in Denver, and Tennessee is the one thing about the Titans that's been consistent. They've been like Dallas in terms they've been 8-8, 9-7. 7-9. They've been in that range for the last so many years, but they've been in certainly a little bit easier division.
Mm-hmm.
Will be interesting to see if can they make that jump from 9-7 to 10-6 or 11-5.
And
get home field advantage occasionally in the playoffs.
Yeah, that'd be nice. I mean, not have to have goal line stands and like miracle plays in order to win in the playoffs. And the formula is right for them, and they look like they figured out the formula, but also a lot of that, about partway through the season, but a lot of that also depended on the fact that they just went to Ryan Tannehill and scratched Marcus Mariota, and he's out of there now. I think they've always had the formula. They wanted to be a tough team, a run-oriented team. The one area that they've been missing has been quarterback position. Yeah.
I mean, they tried it with Mariota, and it just didn't work out. And they finally found something with Tannehill. And it's not that Derrick Henry has been, he got a nice 1-year contract or whatever, and Derrick Henry gets a lot of the glory. But the difference in the Titans was when they switched quarterbacks.
Yeah, which is a shame because, Marcus Mariota looks like the kind of quarterback you'd want to have, but he just never quite played up to what looked like his potential, and that probably mostly started after his injury. He never really seemed to recover from that either mentally or physically, one or both. No,
and it was, he's the second pick in the draft, and, I think probably the thing that hurts Mariota the most was when he went out, the offense improved drastically, and that was the only change.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, this is part of a conversation you and I have had before, that sometimes coaches get fired for a couple of reasons. One is they were playing the wrong players, and that wasn't, their coach they have now is not the case, but the coach before him, I guess that may have been the case.
Yeah, and there's a lot. It's not always and sometimes it's not always I don't know how much at the NFL level or at the professional level that sometimes the coaches have the ability to play who they want to play. Sometimes it's, when you invest in your second pick in the draft and you spend that money on a quarterback, then I think from ownership and the general manager who picked him, they expect that kid to play.
Well, and the proof of that has, I think, always been in the philosophy that the Bills Parcells line of coaches have followed, which is, if you want me to coach these guys, then I get to pick them. And, I'll live and die by my choices, but at least I get to make my choices. And for the most part, that's worked out for that group of folks.
Yeah, but most coaches don't get that freedom.
No, you've got to win a couple of Super Bowls, and things like that, I think, or have a pedigree that you can do that in order to get that freedom.
Yeah, like Bill Belichick.
Yeah, that's right. Well, this is Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, on Friday, I believe it was, Kentucky High School Athletic Association Commissioner Julian Tackett did a Zoom interview with several media outlets, and basically it was a Q&A session. People were able to ask him questions, and he answered them, and the reporting off of that has been pretty interesting. I took it that the biggest reason that he decided to do this when he did was because earlier in the week, Governor Andy Beshear had, in his update on opening the state, the last line item was like June 15th, youth sports can resume. And I think maybe Tackett wanted to try to explain that may or may not apply to the KHSAA because they, of course, have obligations related to school districts, and that affects their decision-making as well. It's not just youth sports, and youth sports organizations. And even if that even applies to them, whether that meant anything for the KHSAA. And so he kind of wanted to walk through and did some of the possibilities related to the return of fall sports, pointing out that, golf and cross country are very low contact sports. People can definitely stay, social distancing can be applied more or less in those sports. Cross country would have to have some tweaks to how it starts a race, but in terms of golf, I mean, basically, no. You could basically stay away from each other pretty easily. But they would be different for soccer and football, and so there's got to be some flexibility on when certain sports may be able to start and when others may not, may start. And also whether or not, if they can start on June 15th, whether or not they want to change how the regular dead period will function, because that may affect some things, when people can get into schools, whether they can, which schools are going to be able to allow people in, because some of your rural schools may be able to allow people in to practice on the facilities and that kind of stuff, and some of your metropolitan schools may not be able to. So there's a whole lot up in the air from what I took from it. I know you read the story on this. What were some of the things that you took away from the interview?
I think what you just said, to be honest with you, it didn't really clarify anything. It was number one, the governor mentioned the June date, and he said youth sports, and I don't think anybody knows what he means by that. What's youth sports? Is that high school? Is it elementary? Is it, I don't even know what that means. Is that T-ball, Little League?
What's a youth?
I don't really know. It was an interesting. I read the article, and it was good in the sense that that they're optimistic that things could happen this fall, but he also mentioned it's not going to be the same as it has been in the past. That's for sure. And you're right, he was more optimistic that maybe golf and cross country could lead the way. But he mentioned volleyball even has some issues because it's an indoor deal. Mm-hmm. With a lot of the things that go with it indoor. It's a team sport, and obviously football and soccer are outdoors, but it's a contact sport, and I think he has a little bit more concerns about that. But I think the thing to take from that is that nothing has been canceled and nothing has been changed in any way, and it's kind of a constant evolving deal that they first have to take orders from the governor and that group before anything else can happen.
Well, and I think that's spot on. And I also think for the KHSAA and for high school sports in general, the other part tied into that is you're dealing with school districts, and whether or not some of these school districts will have to deal with things differently than some others. Like I mentioned, the metropolitan versus the rural. The state may say, you can do these things, you can open up the school to this level, but you may have an increase in cases, say, in Louisville or Lexington or northern Kentucky in the metropolitan Cincinnati area or something like that, and they may have to deal with something different there locally.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's the governor's, like I said, I think the governor has a huge say in it, and also schools. And what'll be interesting to see is, will schools go their own path with this?
Yeah.
Or are schools just going to go, just what everybody else does, if they just back out of it as a group, or will individual schools, go say, listen, we think it's safe, we're going to give our kids an opportunity, and a school district next door decides that no, that will be really interesting, and what the role of the KSLSA has. Now, they have a big role because the KSLSA can just say, no, we're not playing, and that means you're not playing. But do they open the door where they will allow schools the option to play if they so decide?
Well, and
that will be interesting.
He did address that to some degree, because he said, we're going to, typically the KHSAA would say that we're trying to maintain a fairness level here, and
right,
that's
right.
Everybody starts at the same time. You are all under the same restrictions, that kind of thing. But he did say there is a possibility that there would be limitations in some school districts and not limitations in other, and they may have to. The KHSAA may just have to learn how to live with that, because they can't necessarily tell.
I wonder how many school districts want that the decision on themselves.
yeah, it's going to be like the full-time. It's going to be like the year-round practice thing. It's up to the principal. That's what the KHSAA says.
That will be. I know. I would say some school districts probably don't want that individual call.
Yeah, they're going to be they started calling him Friday afternoon and said, "Look, man, you better make a decision about something because we don't want it."
The one thing that he did say that he does not, football. He does not see if they play football, it's going to be in the fall. It's not going to be next spring because he said, and he made a good point. I didn't even think about it. He said we're not going to have 2 football seasons go back to back, and you're not going to play 2 full seasons in 1 year, which what would happen if you moved it to the spring and then you start your next football season in the fall with about a 2-month break. He said we're not doing that.
Yeah, I didn't really think about. I'd seen the rumors that some states were discussing, basically flip-flopping baseball and football because you could play baseball as a more or less non-contact sport, play it in the fall, and then move football to the spring. And I thought to myself, I'm like, I don't know which states are talking about doing that, but they're not going to be in places. They're not going to be in the South. I can just tell you that right now because there's too much. There are too many hurdles that, look, in the South, in the deep South, nothing plays opposite football.
Right.
Soccer is played in the winter.
Right.
Football is king, and they're not giving up the fall and moving it to the spring because there's so many logistics tied into that I don't think they could overcome.
Well, the other thing about the article, and he made a good point, he said, health is going to be the number one factor, but he said, don't kid yourself. Finances and money is also a factor. He said, schools desperately need 5 home football games. And he said, we have schools that will play a home football game, even though they may lose 50-0, they need the gate.
Right.
And he said, playing without fans would be difficult for schools, but he has come up with situations where you play with partial people in stands and so forth. Mm. But that's hard to do in smaller stadiums.
Yeah.
You could actually move high school games to Western Stadium and actually do a good job of you could have a lot of people there, and you actually could space out people if you wanted to. The bigger the stadium, the more you can actually social distance.
Well, and that was one of the points he was talking about is he said, some schools may have to coordinate with each other to find a stadium that they can all basically share and play Friday, Saturday, because a smaller school is not going to have a big enough stadium. We kind of have an example here. I don't know when Glasgow's new facility will be done. That's what they're working on right now. I don't know how much this has interrupted it. They originally they had it scheduled to be ready for the fall. We'll see how that works out. But, Caverna is basically a one-sided stadium. There would have to probably be some worked out ways in which these 3 schools may have to figure out how to share a stadium, and I guess that stadium would have to be Barron County based on just how things are at this very moment. I don't know how that would work out. I hope they're talking about that. The 3 superintendents. It'd be an interesting conversation to have.
Yes, it would be. I don't know, and it's a situation where health has to be considered, economics has to be considered, and just opportunities for students has to be considered as well. Yeah. I'll just be honest with you. Kids, you only go through high school athletics once in your life, and for 99% of the kids that play high school sports, that's the end of it for them.
Yeah. Well,
and to take away the opportunities, it's very, very. I think it's very difficult. And I hope schools can get creative, and I hope things can get to the point where it can't be again. If the standard is that if anybody in the state any athlete gets the virus, we got to shut everything down. Then you might as well not even open. You can't do it that way. We have to have some type of plan and procedures and so forth to do that. And we'll see. I hope. I'm very optimistic that we're getting a handle on things. Mm-hmm. But how we kind of, and it's, you got to draw that line between the economy and health. And there's a line. You can't go one way either way. I don't think that works. If you just shut down everything, that causes all kinds of problems and issues, and you just open up everything at one time, it also causes issues. And I think there's a line that you got to go to, and I hope we can figure it out, because I sure know that kids need the chance, they need the opportunity, and the finances is also important.
You just brought up an important point there about the health and things, because what people probably forget is that the whole lockdown and cancellation-related stuff was to not tax the health system in place and allow the health system time to get prepared for the cases.
Right.
When we are allowed to reopen business, go back to school, that kind of thing. Because without a vaccine, and we don't have one, and I don't know when we'll have one, and that's not even the point, but without one, the virus will return. The question is, can the health system deal with those issues, and can the school districts, can the businesses, if it has sick people, do they have plans in place to deal with the illness? And hopefully what has happened during this last month and a half is that people have gotten these plans in place, and they are able to know what they will do if you have, get someone show up and test positive for the COVID-19 virus. And then they're able to work around that, but maintain more or less a schedule of school, of athletics, of business.
That's correct, because, I think everybody wants to get back to some type of normal way of life.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the term new normal. Every time I hear that, I just want to scream. I do not believe that we're going to have social distance and wear a mask 2 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we're going to do it a year from now. So, when everybody calls it the new normal, if that's the new normal for the next 20 years, we're in a lot of trouble. I think social distancing and wearing the mask is, I think, the temporary normal, and I think it's good for safety. And believe me, I'm doing it, and I can do this the rest of the year if that's what it takes. But to call it the new normal, that we're going to live this way for forever, please, I think we're in trouble for that. So I've been very reluctant to use the word new normal, but I do agree that for fall sports to exist in the fall, it's got to be some modifications and changes and so forth.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% there. And I tell you what, our next segment, we will discuss some of the normal that the Korean baseball organization has taken on in order to have baseball games. So this is Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, the Koreans were early into the COVID-19 thing, I guess because they're right there by China, and they put in, I guess, what we would refer to as draconian measurements, because they basically shut down the whole society. But what has happened out of that, and this is kind of, I guess, where we're getting some idea of how, like, Major League Baseball, which we'll talk about in the sports segment, or the NBA, or some of these other sports, are seeing where they might be able to come back. They have the Korean Baseball League, as we mentioned last week, started playing games, and they're on ESPN, and you can watch them if you want to. And they're pretty interesting. The baseball is not bad at all. I mean, it's a good game. It's baseball. If you like it, you probably like it. If you don't, you probably won't enjoy it. But that's beside the point. And about the worst thing about the games themselves are the people talking about them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like AA, AAA Major League Baseball. They allow, I think, three Americans or 3 foreign players are allowed to play on each team. But the baseball's fine out. It comes on at odd times. It's at like 5:30 in the morning and things like that. But the baseball's fine, and I've watched some of it. I haven't watched the whole game or anything like that. But I agree. I wish the telecast, it gets a little irritating. I wish they just call a game and things like that. But they're having constant guests on there that kind of drive me crazy. But the umpires have, they have the mask over their face and things like that, and it seems like things are, it's baseball. It's they don't have crowds, but they do have like sounds and things like that, that they're playing during the game, and seems like the players are having fun with it and so forth.
Yeah, it's like watching Bull Durham in a way because, the guy's calling it and using wood sticks to make the knocking sound of the bat hitting the ball. I don't know if that's really what they're doing, but, in terms of how it's kind of being outside of the commentary, how you're seeing it and hearing it, they're trying to recreate the idea that you're in the stadium with them.
Yes, and I mean, to be honest with you, you go to a lot of baseball games anyway in July and August or September. They're not necessarily packed arenas anyway.
No, they're not. You were mentioning the foreign players. What I was looking up just like the averages, the league leaders and that kind of stuff, and just trying to learn something about some of the players. The league leading hitter is Jose Fernandez. He's hitting .591. He's from Cuba originally. He played for the Dodgers Angels in their minor leagues in 2017, 2018. What the other thing, before I get to this next guy who was even more interesting, what the other thing I realized was that they must not allow as many foreign pitchers as they do foreign hitters. At least it doesn't bear out that way in the stats.
Well, the guy that pitched the other night was an American pitcher, and he's the son of the AAA manager of the Reds in Louisville.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I know he's one of them. I don't know if there's a limit on pitchers or hitters or whatever. It's I will say pitchers are at such a demand in the United States that may be why we've grabbed every pitcher that could possibly pitch.
Over you can get it across the plate.
United States.
For you, yeah. The number 2 hitter is Preston Tucker, and he may ring a bell for some people because he was the co-freshman of the year in 2009 playing at Florida.
Yep.
So he was an outstanding player in the SEC. He was drafted by the Astros in the 7th round in 2012. And here's the other thing: if you're a Reds fan, your ears probably perked up. If you're like Jason Harbison from the Red Legs Radio Report, if you're a dedicated Reds fan, because he's one of these players. He was traded by the Braves to the Reds for cash consideration or a player to be named later, which is always my favorite player, in December of 2017. Then in 2018, the Reds decided they wanted their money back. Oh, I'm sorry. The Braves traded him to the Reds along with 2 other guys for Adam Duvall. All right.
Yeah.
And then the Reds traded him back to the Braves for cash consideration. So I'm guessing he's kind of a journeyman. I mean, he played in the minor leagues for all them. I don't think he ever made it. Well, he did sign with the White Sox, but yeah, he never made it into a major league game. He played in the minor leagues before he went to the Korean League last year. So this is his second year. And this is the other thing. I don't know what those minor league contracts are worth, or even that his first contract when he was drafted, but they're not worth a whole lot. And in the last 2 years, he signed 2 contracts worth $1.2 million. There's another reason to go play in Korea, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and it's and they treat their baseball players and athletes like celebrities as well.
Yeah. And
so there's a lot of benefits and perks. And when there are crowds in South Korea, what I've read, they're full.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating to look at these other leagues around the world, just because, I mean, you have the Japanese league, and then you have the leagues that are in Mexico and other countries. And it's kind of fascinating because, I mean, baseball, or the sport itself originated in the United States, and it's considered to be, America's game. That's what people say, and that's what they think of. But it really is, as an international game, it's kind of revered, especially in Asia.
It really is, and it's and the benefit with of this for Major League Baseball is they actually get to watch and study how South Korea is doing this.
Yeah.
And that's got to be of help when we talk the next segment about opening up Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I figure this goes back to what you said before last week, which was somebody's got to go first. And it's
That's
even
correct.
better if somebody is going first and it's not in the United States and you can see how effective it is.
Well, it's just like the big fights they put on this, Dana White and the
UFC there?
Yeah, and they pulled that off, and there's a lot of people that raise Cain with them because one of their fighters tested positive, but that's why they test. They caught it beforehand, and that's exactly why they went through all that, and they pulled the fight off. They'll have another one Wednesday and another one Saturday.
Yeah. Well, I'm not necessarily a big UFC fan and that kind of thing, but I was fascinated by not just going first, but of course, in the case of Dana White, it's not surprising that he also just kind of thumbed his nose at the naysayers in the process. But they did follow protocols that are being asked to follow. Now, the problem is we will see, as they say, in 2 weeks how that really pans out for everybody, because we don't know. I mean, they did the testing and they caught the one fighter, but I don't know how their workout regimens and all go. I mean, I don't know, whether they go to gyms or they have trainers. I have no idea how all that works out for them, like it does in boxing. Sparring partners. I don't know any of that stuff about the UFC. So we'll see how that all pans out. And he may be proven right and he may be proven wrong, but, somebody's got to step out there, I guess, and get proven one way or the other. Yeah, and he's got a bunch of independent contractors too. If they don't want to fight, they don't want to fight. Yeah, and that is when we get to this next segment and well, let's skip to the NBA real quick, because it seems like if the NBA is unable to complete its season, the hang-up is going to be that the owners and the players' union cannot reach an agreement about how to do this. Because I think and then another part of the NBA is that they had 2/3 of the year done, and a bunch of players and teams are out of it completely, and it seems like to me those are the people who are making the most stink out of not playing. They're out of it. Why come back and risk whatever? And I think the commissioner has finally figured out, though, that if they don't do something and if they don't play a little bit, they're going to have a financial disaster on their hands as well. Well, and that's the other thing, because they had floated the idea of, cutting salaries because, by 40% or something like that, because of the lack of the completion of the season. If it's not complete, and of course the players are like, well, no, we're not going to do that. I mean, why would you? You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's like, okay, you're not going to do that. But if they come up with a plan and you're not going to return, then okay, that's fine. Don't return. You forfeit 40% of your salary. We'll figure that part out, all right? That's exactly right. You can't have it both ways. Yeah, and that's, the union is a good thing. I mean, you're a member of the teachers union, right? So, I mean, yes. Unions do good things for their constituents, but at the same time, that also makes it sometimes difficult for the individuals to make decisions for themselves in those circumstances. And I just don't. I mean, the thing is it's a sticky situation, and there's no way to unstick it without some level of, I think, genuine conversation between players and owners and ownership. That's got to happen there, and not get things can't get too territorial; or it won't get fixed. No, because it looks terrible in a pandemic when those guys are making the salaries they're making that they could possibly be fighting over money. Yeah. Yeah, with 20 million people out of work. Yeah, they all look a wee bit greedy at the moment when they start going down that path, and yes. And that's the other thing Adam Silver has been mostly concerned about is the appearance, because they probably have the ability. Well, they do have the ability to pay for testing on a routine basis for their players, but he's concerned that's not going to be a good look that they're doing. Yeah, I think he's wrong on that. Perception, I don't think most people care about that, to be perfectly honest with you. As long as in your city, the firefighters and the police and the nurses, they have their testing, I don't think most people overall care about that. And, if you worry about the Twitter patrol and you worry about perception, then they'll never play. Yeah, well, I think a bunch of the biggest NBA diehards at the moment, I mean media members, are concerned that that's the path that they're headed down. Anyway, Let's talk about Major League Baseball here when we come back. This is the Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, earlier today it's been reported that the owners in Major League Baseball have come up with a plan, and they've sent it to the Players Union, or will be sending it to the Players Union. This is a story that is from a person who wanted to speak on the condition of anonymity because they are not allowed to talk about this freely, which means it came from an owner or the commissioner's office, one of those. that they could come back on the weekend of July 4th. I didn't see the actual particulars, but I think they're related to the ones we talked about last week, where basically they'd have 3 10-team divisions. They would have testing in place for the players and the staff. They would have to manage how they were in the dugout together, that kind of thing. Probably wear masks, in the dugout when they come onto the field for announcements, like they are in the Korean League. And there'll probably be some other things that the players would have to be able to do.
Well, a couple of things I read on it. They are going to play in major league stadiums.
Yeah.
Without fans at first, for sure. But they're going to play in major league stadiums for those for those places in which the governor will not open it up or approve of that. They'll have to move to their spring training site.
Mm-hmm.
Did see that. It looks like they're going to expand the roster from 25 to 30. And then have basically a practice squad of about 20 or 25 at their spring training site. It didn't look like the minors are going to be playing much, so that's going to be their backup, those 20, 25, I saw that. And possibly extend the designated hitter to the National League.
Yeah, and that part is kind of interesting, and I guess they would do that so that everything is kind of on the same page as far as the rosters and that kind of thing?
I guess. I'm not really for sure, and they're going to play around 80 games. It's a vast majority of them will be in interdivision, but the National League East will also play a series against the American League East, and the National League Central versus the American League Central. They're not going to. You're not going to go the National League East versus the American League West. So it seems like to me they've got it pretty detailed on what they're going to do. July 4th weekend. They're going to give them three weeks to get ready. It looks like they'll start in June, spring training, and hopefully, if the Players Association approves of it, I think that's the owners approved of it. The plan has to go to the union on Tuesday. If you know anything about sports, the toughest union in all the sports is the baseball union.
Yeah,
so they'll argue over money, and if some way that the players turn this down and they get into a big fight over money, and they end up just not playing, then you can move baseball back to about 2030. That's how much people will be disgusted with them.
It's a good question, that part, because I don't know that people understand the money side. When we were just talking about the NBA, like they would be upset if the players, reject things on money and the owners on money. But I think they would understand they're playing in confined areas against each other, and there is physical contact. So you could understand why the players would be concerned about playing for their health reasons. I think they would feel differently about baseball players.
Yes. Yeah, it's the money deal that people will get upset about, fighting over the split of the cost. I think is what they're going to fight over. I think players are going to say that we're assuming the risk and the owners are not, so we should maybe get a bigger cut of the pie, maybe.
And I would have to say, in this particular instance, I think I might be on the player's side with that particular argument.
Well, yeah, but people are not going to be on the player's side if they refuse to play because of that. I can tell you that. I know how that works.
Right. I hear you on that front. And I guess this is the thing. I mean, we want to see these sports return, but just as like we've discussed, I think probably 2 or 3 times now, it's just not so simple as turn the lights on and players run onto the field. I mean, there's just so much legal wrangling and things that are going on that are not for public purview, and those things are just hard for you and I, or just general John and the public, to understand, just because we don't live in that life. We don't have to deal with those things.
No, that's true, and that's the frustrating part about it too, especially as I said, in the pandemic. With so many people out of work, you would think it would be a little bit easier to solve, but evidently it's not.
Yeah, well, they think the pandemic's going to end as well, and they still want to be able to buy that Ferrari.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
They're like, look,
I hope it works out, because I think they're missing a great opportunity to put baseball back in the forefront if they can do it safely.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that front because, I mean, baseball has just been totally overshadowed, not just by basketball and football, but, I mean, even things like the UFC that you were just talking about. These other sports that are popping up that are taking the airtime for baseball, and people just aren't as interested in it as they used to be. And plus, I mean, with so many games and all, and people, deciding they're not going to go out to a game on a Tuesday night whenever the game starts at 8 because of TV time and gets done at midnight. Those things have hurt baseball in recent years, and they have an opportunity to basically have the field to themselves to prove it's still a sport worth watching.
Yes. And if they can pull it off, boy, they ought to jump on it.
Yep. Well, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be back next week.
Thanks for listening, and be sure and join James and John once again next Monday at 4 for the Brown Sports Bag, a local weekly sports machine presented by McDonald's of Glasgow.
Coming soon to your FM dial, this is Fox Sports Radio, WCDS Glasgow, AM 1230.